Well, good afternoon or good evening. Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Tonight, you are in for a treat. I will tell you, I have learned a lot myself from this topic, and I'm looking forward to the insight, the perspective, and the education that our panel will share with you and our community tonight. I am Sarika Barlow, the CEO of YWCA El Paso del Norte region, and I have the honor of working with this body of panel and our team from the YWCA. Our mission is about eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And I would like to introduce to you our moderator tonight, Miss Gina Martinez from Children's at Risk. She is more than qualified to moderate this panel. She has served as a special education teacher and an advocate with over a decade of experience. She was a special educator for 8 years in Austin, but we have her now in this wonderful city of El Paso. She has overseen a lot of life skills in middle schools and helping out with effective teaching and learning. She is an advocate for families navigating educational rights, and she has gone through a lot in her current position. She may not think so because she is more new in the role at Children's at Risk, but she is working as a catalyst to change and improve the quality of life for children and through advocacy and policy. So I am going to turn it over to Miss Gina. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for Sarika for that introduction. For me, this is really kind of a full circle moment because now I get to dive back into the roots of being an educator and really an advocate. And it's such a privilege to be part of this vital conversation. And I thank you so much for inviting me to moderate this. And really we've got some superstars who are going to be sharing their stories with us. And we are just going to do a round robin so everyone can introduce themselves. And Ms. Laura Marquez from PDN Children's, can you please introduce yourself and your organization?
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be part of this discussion today. My name is Laura, as Gina mentioned. I work at PDN Children's. We're a local nonprofit that provides services to children with disabilities from the age of 0 to 21. We provide therapeutic interventions, educational opportunities, and just ongoing connection to community resources and supports. And really our goal and our mission of our work is just to help children with disabilities reach their potential and just have the best life experience that they can have. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Laura. And now we are going to go over to Ms. Kristi Lai, who is a parent and self-advocate. So Ms. Lai, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kristi Lai. I'm an autistic mother of children with multiple disabilities. I'm also a grandma. I am a member of National Desert Adapt Desert Adapt, which is a part of a national advocacy group for people with disabilities. I want to give a brief image description in case someone's in here that has visual impairment. I am a Chicana woman with wavy hair. I have wavy silvery hair, medium skin. I have a nose ring, and I have a black shirt on.
Thank you so much for that, Kristi. And now we are going to go to Mr. Christian Salas. If you could introduce yourself, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Christian Salas. Excuse me. I currently serve as assistant and here in a couple of months, associate professor of social work for El Paso Community College. Yes, ma'am. Proud Donald Tejano, but a proud UTEP minor grad. Prior to working in academia, I actually served as a mental health professional, as a therapist, covering everything from children all the way up until adults and elderly, working with federal probation, families, pretty much the whole gambit, right? And I've served in various panels in the past, and even like Laura, served as a board of directors for Disability Rights Texas, which is the PNA, or the Protection and Advocacy designate for the state of Texas. So working with and advocating for people with disabilities is a big passion of mine, as well as I know many of our, or if not all of our panelists tonight.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Salas. Now we are going to go to Ms. Karla Puertas-Guaderrama. And so, Karla, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. My name is Karla Puertas-Guaderrama. I am from a company called Empowering Hands. You all might ask, what is Empowering Hands? Well, we're an employment agency, but we're a very unique employment agency. We work with people with disabilities from ages 14 all the way up to our youngest person would be about 89, okay? So we help employ people, but we start them young, okay? We have different programs that I'm very excited to talk to you about. And these are free programs for anybody with a disability, okay? So we've had our company for about, well, actually for going on 11 years. And my sister, Raquel, started this company 11 years ago, but she's a special ed teacher. So with that said, you know, her passion has just grown within these years. And I have been blessed to be part of this company for 8 years. And I am a dentist by trade in Mexico. However, due to all the craziness going on over there, unfortunately, I had to put my practice on hold, and have been here for 8 years. And I still put smile on people's faces, but in a different way, by helping them understand their disability, helping them advocate for themselves, and also helping them be successful for life. So that's who we are. We're Empowering Hands, and I'm here and very excited to learn and also to give information on what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're so lucky to have you in our community, and really every single person on this call. And we're going to kind of dive straight into some of these questions because we've got a lot to cover here. And as everyone has seen and heard, we've got some subject matter experts who will be sharing their experiences with us. And I'm going to kick off with a question that seems so easy, but for all of you on this call, it is rather complicated. And the question is, what does the term disability mean? And specifically to you, you know, that can be so easily touched on, but it's way more complicated. And I think we're going to see that as we answer this question. And I'm actually going to go in the opposite order. So Ms. Karla, if you can start, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. You know, when I read this, the questions, I was excited to talk about this specific, what is a disability? For me, it's focusing on what you can do, not on what you cannot do, okay? For us at Empowering Hands, we focus on how we can teach you to accept your disability, but more than anything, to help an employer learn how to work with that person with a different ability. So for us, that's what a disability is. We don't really like to acknowledge and use the dis, but more of the ability, but we all work different ways.
Absolutely. And now, Mr. Salas, what about you? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, you know, I teach stuff like this every day to my social work students at EPCC and sometimes at UTEP. And I tell people we're kind of in the business of labeling people, right? We provide a diagnosis to people. And sometimes that diagnosis is in the form of a disability, whether it's sensory, physical, even mental health issue or mental disorder. However, it goes beyond that label, right? It's not just that label, but it's understanding how that label manifests in people. The way I see it, however, it's looking at ways in which individuals that have been diagnosed with these disabilities find ways to still thrive. that in an individual who has been diagnosed with some sort of eye condition and eye impairment and such, it's not the disability, but the ability that they find to circumvent that issue, right? To find another way of seeing without the vision. Someone with a hearing impairment, of finding ways to hear with their limited ability. And whether that's finding new ways, new technologies, or even themselves inventing new ways, right? We'll find kids who have hard of hearing that will use, technology nowadays, right? These little things right here. We can't go anywhere without. Was it last week when AT&T went down? What happened to half of the country? We felt naked. So that's to me as disability in reality is it's having individuals find the ability within the challenge that they are posing and that they have been placed in.
Absolutely. I really love that response. And I'm excited to kind of hear now where Kristi comes in.
So a disability from the ADA is defined as having something visible, invisible, emotional, something that impacts and limits one or more major life activities. Within the disability community, we tend to not like to use the word different abilities or special abilities or special needs, because disability is not a bad word. And when we don't use that word, we further stigmatize having a disability. So for me, disability and getting a label or getting a diagnosis is just a tool to find ways to help accommodate yourself so you can function better.
Yeah, absolutely. And those tools are vital for people to be able to thrive. And so I totally agree. And now, Laura, what about you?
Let me unmute myself. I read over the question and I think a lot, I've thought a lot about it. And, as somebody who has my own identity and being full aware that I don't identify as a disabled individual, knowing that, a lot of times I feel like disability can be a label, sometimes a way to other people, when really just all of us have a different way of doing things. And in a lot of ways, it's just a construct. It's something that really can other. And like Kristi mentioned with stigma, we all, if somebody has a certain diagnosis or condition, it's what can society do to support that person to, again, live their life the way they deserve to live, to have dignity and opportunities the way everybody should have. And so it's definitely, I go back and forth on what it is, but really the main part of what I feel as somebody who identifies as an ally is just to empower. Like my friend Kristi mentioned, having disability pride is something that I want to instill as a provider in the parents that I work with, to feel pride in their child's experience, because most of the families that I come into contact with, their child has a disability. And so feeling that, we all deserve the right to feel pride in our identity. And I feel pride as a Latina. And so I want, the same way I feel pride in being a Latina, I want somebody else to feel pride in whatever identity that they have.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it is. It's so important to support people the way that they need to be supported. Every single one of us needs that. And it's really just addressing those. So thank you so much for that. And now I'm going to kind of dive a little deeper on that. Why does language matter when we're talking about disabilities? And Kristi, you said something really important there, and I'd really like for you to expand on some of that as to why it's important to use specific terminology to address people who have disabilities.
Language is very important because people with disabilities don't want to be, they want to just be like everybody else. We want to be like everybody else. And so a lot of times people with disabilities are infantized, like there's the assumption that you're, or the opposite, where you do the whole, where kids want so badly to impress their parents, and there's that whole, do you have a girlfriend? So then they're like, oh, I need a girlfriend, because, people just let your kids or people be who they are organically. And I think that that's how people better thrive, and not putting expectations that, you know, like for example, with autism, we have the need for kids to be socialized, right? And we try to work on them socializing, but sometimes kids are okay just on their own. So just kind of getting to know your child as a person and recognizing, just like your children who don't have disabilities, they have needs and wants and things that they have different views on things as well. So just not, you know, trying to just treat them like anybody else.
Does anybody have anything else to kind of add to that? You know, as I was teaching, people first language was really important. And so, Mr. Salas, I'm interested to hear what your perspective is.
Yeah, again, going off my first answer when I spoke about labels, right? Labels are extremely powerful and they carry a lot of stigma, a lot of stereotypes with them. And I feel that when we put that label on somebody, when we call somebody, instead of, the wheel-bound person, the bed-bound person, the autistic child, that depressed individual, that blind guy, so on and so forth, you're not talking about the person, you're talking about the disability or the diagnosis, and therefore you're dehumanizing the person. In other words, you're not talking about that person, you're talking about the disorder that this person is living with. Mm-hmm. And you are now putting all that stigma, all these stereotypes that go along with that label on that person. So, and the detrimental part in this is that sometimes, even as providers, as a therapist, as a clinician and such, I would hear often where people are labeled, they're giving a diagnosis, but it's not explained to them, right? Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be depressed? Or am I supposed to just act sad, right? That's not the case. And so people can potentially internalize those stereotypes and that stigma that comes along with the diagnosis or with the label, and potentially act or do things simply because, well, that's expected of someone with that label, with that diagnosis, with that condition, with that disability.
Yeah.
I just want to say something about what he mentioned about the labels. Certain communities within disability have different ways of identity. And for the most part, people first language has always been the ideal, right? What people say. However, certain communities, such as the autism community, we prefer to say autistic as opposed to person with autism, because it's very much a part of me. Like I can't leave my autism at home, right? Like there's nothing, and it's not something that can be cured. It's not something that's going to change, and it's very much ingrained in who I am. Just as the deaf community, when you're referring to the deaf community as a culture, it's a capital D. And so they don't see people, that's their culture. So, there's always so much pressure put on, let's fix people, let's save people. And there's recently a book I read called Loving Your Own Bones, which talks about that, how one time someone said to someone, look, when you go to heaven, you're going to be so happy because you'll be able to hear. And their friend said, well, no, maybe God will just know ASL. So that perspective of recognizing that people have their identity is sometimes ingrained with their disability, and it's for that individual to choose. As opposed, a lot of parents tell, my child's disability does not define them. Maybe for you, you don't want to feel that, but for some of us, it does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to kind of go off of that, as being a special education teacher, I was very adamant about using people first language in any time that I talk about people with disabilities. And I had a very colorful conversation with an editor, a newspaper editor, and he really educated me on autistics wanting to use that language. And so it changed. And I think so many of us are kind of caught with like, what should we do? How should we address this person? What do you guys recommend in those situations? Laura, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you know the person's name, address them by their name. That's really, when you're first interacting with somebody, you're interacting, my background is social work. So when I'm meeting a family or someone for the first time, I'm just getting to know them as the person in front of me. And as you build rapport, I would definitely, again, person first language comes from the provider world, and I feel like that was the provider world, our attempt to go away from the harmful language that was existent in the past. So I appreciate person first language for what it's trying to do. But when I learned about identity first language, I mean, I fell in love, because that's the ideal. We want everybody to feel, again, pride in their identity. And so as a rule of thumb, establish rapport, refer to the person by their name, and if you need to know, then ask them, how do they identify? I think, in this world of, the simple thing of, me adding my pronouns to my name, I'm giving that signal that I am open to this. So I think, like, us as individuals, and it kind of touches in why language matters, right? The words we use present to the world, or they either present to the world who we are, and they dictate our actions. So that's, language is the basis of communication. Language is how we form relationships. So the language we use is so important to not, making stigma and defeating it, and that's where we start, is our language. We start with language, and then we move on to our actions, because we know there's a lot of work to be done constantly in kind of dismantling ableism and racism and all these things, but our language is the first point of where we can really have a practical change. And so yeah, I just think, like, at the end of the day, build rapport with something, build a relationship with the person, and then ask them, how do they prefer?
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And as we look at some of the harder sides, I want to ask kind of a difficult question, and I think people with special needs do face different challenges and sometimes different prejudices based on the types of abilities that they have. Karla, you're out, I'm sure, sometimes in the community doing the work that you're doing. What are some of the prejudices that you see towards kids that have visible abilities versus those that don't? And how can we as community members help diminish those?
Of course, that's number one part of my job, to go out into the community and talk to different employers or different community members on how we have, their future employees with disabilities. But more than anything, it's important, I think, to educate. Education is, I think, the number one thing. And like everybody in the panel is saying, when we are talking to somebody, like, for example, that is blind, I'm going to say just a really brief story about one of the counselors that I work with. When I started working with him, he's blind, okay, we got really, he gave me several of our clients and everything, and I told him, I asked him one time, I go, his name is Oscar, and I told him, Oscar, I want to ask you a question, but I don't want to be disrespectful in any means, but I want you to be honest with me. How can I approach somebody that is, are you like blind? Are you not that blind? Are you visually impaired? How visually impaired are you? It's I get paperwork where it's a visual impairment. I understand, but a lot of times, I see the customer and I know that he's blind because of the paperwork that I have, but I don't know how blind. So how do I refer, like, to this to people that I know that they're blind, but you can't see it. Right. Mm-hmm. And he's like, Karla, it's really simple. With a blind community, you're either blind or you can see. Mm-hmm. If you can see, you're not blind. So it's black and white. It's really easy, really, really easy. Don't stress about it. Ask, how blind are you? How much could you see? And we're going to tell you, okay, I do use a cane, or no, I don't use a cane, but I need a magnifier. So when we go out to the community and tell the community, okay, this specific person will need a magnifier, they can use the phone, or we provide the magnifiers. And at the beginning, the community is very like, oh, but like, can I touch them? Can I? And I'm like, treat them the way you would treat the person next door to you. Okay. That is the ultimate way to treat a person with a visually impairment. And I'm just talking about visually impairment right now. But I think it goes for anybody, because we have visual impaired people that you can't tell, that they're blind. And I have been very blessed to meet several of these people, and you're like, they're amazing. They dress themselves, they put makeup on themselves, and it's like, how do they do it? They've been trained, they've been asked, they've been like this for a while. So it's really, whether you see the disability or you cannot see the disability, I think it's very important for the community or the people that they're working with to ask, how much can they do? How much can, even if it's autism, it's very important that, okay, maybe they can't be around, a lot of flashing lights. And a lot of times that's, again, stereotypical. I have worked with autistic students, and they're amazing. They're, even with their communication skills, and then they're like, they're autistic, and I'm like, yes. Did you ask them? There's no like magic pill that, like Kristi was saying, there's no like something magic that is gonna, or you leave your autism at home. You can't. You carry it with you. You learn about it. You love it. You go out and be successful. And I think that is where we're like falling in between that. A lot of people are very much afraid, afraid to work with people with any disability. So more than anything, I think it's educating that is going to help us.
Yes, absolutely. They're people, and we just need to treat them like people. I really love that. Christian, what about you?
Yeah, I really like that answer that was just given, because when working with people of whatever diagnosis, whatever disability, right? I think one of the most important things, just like it was said already, it's we can tell to what extent someone is quote unquote abled or disabled, right? And I remember sitting in a panel for Region 19 once for visually impaired, for VI teachers. And you can tell that this group of people were in it for the right reason. They were there to help their students. And I remember getting a question from a teacher asking, what's the best thing I can do to help my students? And I simply said, why are you asking me? I'm not your student, right? So as much as we have all this wealth of knowledge, even in this panel, I think it goes back to what Karla just mentioned, and what I'm sure is echoed by everybody in this panel, that it really stems from every disability, every ability, anything. It varies from person to person. So it's going to be very unique to the individual, right? As the story goes, just because you met an autistic person, guess what? You met an autistic person. It's not going to be the same. I can have a room of 10 people have been diagnosed with depression. That means I have 10 different possible scenarios of how depression is affecting those people. So I feel that it stems from, like it was already alluded to, that fear of the unknown. This is something that it's not water cooler talk. It's not something that you just sit down and like, oh, let me read about disability. Oh, let me read about mental health, right? And so I think it's not a taboo subject per se, but it's one that I don't think people really want to engage to this level. where you feel comfortable in having a conversation with somebody about what they are, again, quote unquote, able and not able to do. And again, I apologize. I go back to what I say in class, right? I tell my students, the more comfortable you are with having that conversation with someone, and the more upfront, let me rephrase that, the more direct you are, right? And how you approach somebody and just say, like, can you tell me more about, what are you able to see? To what extent can you see? What's the distance?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? You just created a rather calm and a safe place for them to share that information with you and say, like, oh yeah, well, I can see, like, for example, are you able to see from here to that poster? What poster are you talking about? Okay, what about the doorway?
Yeah.
Or even minimalize or dehumanize, like Kristi said earlier, of, if you're talking to someone who is deaf and you slow it down and you talk louder, it has nothing to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well, and I think as people who work with people with special needs, we've seen that happen, and you're absolutely correct. And now I'm going to ask a question that I would like each of you to answer, because I think it's important for community members who don't really interact with people with special needs or don't know much can learn a little bit. And that is, how can community members best support your everyday efforts in providing services to people with special needs? And the second part is, what community resources are lacking? And so I am going to go to you, Ms. Karla, to kick that off. So how can we best support you, and what is lacking right now that maybe we can rally around?
Okay, so through what I do, like I said before, job placement, there's many programs. There's many programs that possibly a lot of the community members don't know about how to get into it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so we work through the state, and the state will have different programs. And like I said before, we start them young at 14. However, there's other, I'm sure through the public school system, there's other programs that each school provides. But I'm going to talk about what we provide. So there's programs that are to help the kids transition, or the students transition from high school, middle school, high school, on to the workplace or on to college. Okay. These programs, like I said, are through the state. Okay. We have a program called Project Search. Okay. Project Search right now we have 3 hospitals where we work with the hospitals of Providence, and there's 10 to 12 kids that are selected from their last year of their 18 plus programs that they have through the high schools. And we've been doing this for 5 years, and I just learned this year that there's a lot of parents that they don't know about this program.
Yeah.
This program, these 10 to 12 kids that are selected, they're selected to be part of the hospitals of Providence. They train in a hospital. Not to say that they're going to be, doctors, nurses, they can be whatever. But through this training, they help. So like when they get out of this program, they'll be able to work and then maybe proceed to go to school to do whatever they want to do, or to just gain experience and work in the field that they provide. They go through 3 rotations, and it's very competitive. Okay, but not all the districts know about it. So that is I was like, really? Before that, right now, we've been working with another program called Priets, and that program is also for high schools. And we kind of geared them into learning about, work readiness, how to research, what is it that they really want to do versus maybe this is what I wanted to do, but never mind, this is not what I want to do. So we expose them to a lot of information out there. And guess what? I've been like so blessed to be part of this program, because I tell the kids, there's no test, there's no right or wrong answer. And as soon as I said there's no test, it's like, because they've been going through tests all of their lives. So this is something that is going to kind of really stay with them because it's for them individually. Everybody has a different need, a different one, a different, what they want to do. And we focus on that since they're freshmen all the way through high school. And, after high school, there's more programs. So I invite everybody to go through your local vocational rehab workforce and start getting them involved since they're in high school. I'm telling you high school, but because that's what I work with. But since high school, a lot of these parents don't know about these programs either. When they're through high school, it's maybe an hour. If they're in the block schedule, it's an hour and 25 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes, something like that. If they're in the other schedule, it's like 45 minutes, and it's a class once or twice a week. The parents don't know about this. So, this is just a little something that we can provide for the community to learn and know that there's so many programs out there, and just. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually a Go project teacher, which is a vocational program just like yours. And what I would say lacked as resources was job opportunities. And so hopefully that'll be a gap that is filled. And now, Miss Kristi, tell us what about you? What is a support that the community can provide to you, and what's lacking that maybe we can rally around?
I think that quite often it's forgotten that kids with disabilities grow up. We infantize people. And just like she said, having opportunities, integrating, being in community, but with everybody, but also with adults with disabilities. There's a lot of Center for Independent Living in El Paso. They have resources. If your child has a certain disability and they're struggling with it, find an adult mentor with the same disability, read books written by adults with disabilities, and most importantly, vote, because we have legislation that comes through that supports people with disabilities. And if you don't vote in the right people, if you don't get to know your legislators, you have a child with disability, you tell them what they need, because your legislators need to know that you're advocating for this. The waiting lists are so long. And, there are cuts to Medicaid. People with disabilities don't even have marriage equality. People can't get married because they won't have health insurance. I mean, these are the things that you need to advocate for your children, because it's going to take a lot of time to make it happen. And I mean, that's pretty much it. Just, get involved, meet other people, read and learn about disability justice. And definitely, and we have really great legislators locally, to be honest with you. A lot of them are really okay with disability policy, but you know what? Write the people in Austin, because the people in Austin are the ones that really need to hear it.
Absolutely, Kristi. I flashed my voted sticker,
Yes.
because it is imperative to ensuring that we're advocating for people in general, everybody.
And local. And local.
Yeah.
You know what? We have a lot of inaccessibility in the city. And if our city council people know, you know what, if you're not going to make sure we're accessible, I'm not voting for you. Then they'll start to think about it, because your child is going to be a voter one day.
Yep.
And you don't want to be, we go to restaurants. I've been invited to something and we've gone, and then it's not accessible. And if I invited a friend, I have to double check, because I don't want to show up and my friend can't stay.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I 100%. So now, Laura, what about you? I think you work with a younger demographic, and so tell us a little bit about the supports that really the best supports we can provide for people with special needs.
Yeah, I mean, our agency, serves children from the beginning of their journey, children who might have a developmental disability, natural diagnosis or a delay. Really, I think the big gaps that we see in the services in the younger population, childcare. Childcare is a huge barrier. If you're a parent being a parent is hard, period. And childcare is inaccessible, period. But it's exponentially more difficult if you have a child with a disability and you're trying to find childcare so that not only so that they can have access to early education, which we know the outcomes for children who have exposure to early education down the line, that's just a continued pipeline to having healthy outcomes later on in life. But if you think about the economic impact of parents not having access to childcare, they're out of the workforce. They're kept in poverty, and that, people, the reality is people with disabilities are kept in poverty because employers are not willing to take a chance to employ them because of services that Kristi mentioned, long-term supports and services that would keep them in the community or keep them, in the populations where they deserve to be are not there. Our country, our policies, our politicians are not investing in the basic human rights of folks with disabilities. And it's seen, from the beginning. I will say the services get far less, as Kristi mentioned, once, they go into adult. There's more services for children. But I think the biggest thing that really affects the trajectory of life and outcomes is childcare. And so, we as an agency, we operate an inclusive early learning center. We're one inclusive early learning center in a city of how many? I don't even know how many is our population. And, we're about to open our second facility, and we know that we will be full immediately because we're serving a need in another part of the city where the city is growing. But again, we're just one organization. And I think that's for us, for me, I challenge other providers. I challenge you to take a chance on the child, and try to make your programs more accessible, be understanding, don't be afraid. Sometimes, we might hear a behavior diagnosis or we might hear something and then that makes us back away. But I think we need to just put that aside and take a chance on the child, take a chance on the family, because the outcomes are huge if we can, let children have access to other children and other learning opportunities, and then let parents have access to education and jobs and other opportunities so that the whole family can have the best outcome possible. So I think that's definitely one area that is a high need, is childcare. And then another area is just, services for diagnosis. I challenge my fellow providers out there that are psychologists or LCSWs or speech pathologists. Those are the professions that can help diagnose. We have 6 months plus wait list for a child that's seeking to get an autism diagnosis. And to get a diagnosis of autism, that's a passport to services. That's a passport to something that can support you later on in life and help you, again, just achieve better outcomes. But so many children are not getting services or not getting the assistance they need until way too late. And I think that's something that, we're trying to impact at our agency. We try to do professional development. We try to build awareness amongst other professionals to want to go into this profession of serving this population. And we will continue to do so. But, again, the more people that know, the more people that are passionate, it helps the cause. For sure.
I took a deep breath there because you're absolutely right. And now, Christian, share with us.
Sure. Yeah. So, I get to wear the hat of teacher now, I guess, right? And I'm kind of glad that I'm the last one to answer this question. I hope, but because I would like to kind of ask the rhetorical question of everybody is: did you all know about half of the programs that are on here tonight prior to tonight? Right? Did you know about PDN? Did you know about empowerment? Did you know about even what the mission, as Sarika started off, what the mission of what the YWCA is? And so I guess where I'm going with this is, you being here, and this goes for the participants, this is for people watching this later on, your task now, I guess, the homework for tonight is pass the information along, right?
Yeah.
You are now aware of this. You now hold that power, which is knowledge. You hold that power that is information about some of the services that are available, not only or that are available here in El Paso and in Texas. Now, do you know all the its and bits? No, right? But I can assure you that you know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. At the same, or in the same kind of vein, I'm sure that everybody here knows somebody that doesn't know what we just talked about tonight, right? Sharing that information about the legislation, sharing that information about the services, sharing information about topics, the questions we answered tonight, right? That's really, power is not, knowledge is power. And again, I'm using my
Well, and I think that leads me into like the next question. And, those of you that are listening, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A section here. But, you're right. Knowledge is power. And I'm really interested in hearing what maybe some of the resources are that you can share here. Kristi mentioned some books. You've mentioned, obviously, being aware of things. What else? Laura, do you have any resources that you want to share or that you're very keen on sharing with our speakers here and our participants?
Oh, so many. So many. I really believe in the power of social media. It helps me. I follow so many great pages that I just get, I'm always reinforced with this message of, just trying to be accessible. I can definitely drop all of the social media pages that I love to follow. I think one that I did want to share that just offers training to childcare centers. So again, just to bring it back to the topic of early childhood, and then, being that YWCA is one of the largest early childhood educators in our city, the trainings that are provided for early childhood educators. So Texas AgriLife Extension has a great set of modules to just from just the bare basics of having, creating an inclusive classroom to, in looking at the questions, and I don't know if we'll be able to talk about it, but how to make, activities accessible for all, all children, regardless of the disability. There's a lot of modules on there. They're fairly affordable. I know, I don't know if like they can be taken as a group, but I can drop the link in there for the AgriLife Extension. That's just one resource that's operated out of Texas A&M. And it's just another resource for the community again, and just specifically pinpointing on childcare and early childhood education. It's a tool. Again, we're not going to learn everything in one day, and we're not going to become experts, but I think just coming to the table wanting to learn and being hungry to be better, it's always like, I will be so happy with that any day, because if you're coming to the table instead of saying like, no, I know everything already. No, you're coming because you want to learn and you want to soak it up. So I can drop some links for sure.
Absolutely. Any of you that have links to share, that'd be greatly appreciated. And, since I started in as a teacher, one of the things that has rapidly changed is communication devices, everything from Dynavox and now to AI. What are some, very cutting edge IT tools that you guys are seeing out there? Christian, do you have any, or Karla, have you become aware of any? Or some that excite you, or Kristi?
I attended the EduTech conference for Australasia a few years ago, which is educational technology. And I'm a tech geek. My husband is actually a VR guy. He's a software developer. Wow. So our kids are homeschooled, and this is like our thing, right? So while there, I was able to dissect a frog virtually, which was amazing, because for me, being autistic, the sensory part of smelling the formaldehyde is so overwhelming. And I was picking it up, and I dropped it and it flopped and I screamed and everybody laughed because I was like, oh my God, and they're like, it's not real. Okay, it's not real. It's not real. But having the ability to do things like that, finding programs for your kids, I know Oculuses are pretty expensive. I mean, I get that. But it's a really good investment. I love mine. There's so many things that you could do. You could draw, you can color, and also recognize that AI is not such a bad thing. A lot of autistic people use AI. I use AI. There are times where I can't quite figure out the right words for something. And so I'll put something in and then reword it and then reword it and then reword it. And then, this is good. And go with that. We do that for calculators. It's just another resource. I know that people worry about inauthenticity with that. But sometimes for autistic people, we're always practicing things before we speak it. And I found that for many people, at least a lot of autistic adults, it's ideal because it can help us come up with things that we can't quite put our finger on to do ourselves. So be open to technology.
I agree. Anybody else?
Just really quick, I believe it was last year, I went to conference in Austin, and there's this printer for and it was for VI, for visually impaired. There's this printer that for those students that like want a map, like you think how does a visually impaired read a map, so this is also part of it. It's a printer that once you program where you want to go and how you're going to go, and it prints with, it's a special paper, and it elevates the I guess the area where you have to go. It maps it to you, and so you're touching the map, and it'll tell you exactly where to go, how to get there. And it was amazing. I was like, what? So there's a lot. Yes, I agree with Kristi. There's a lot of technology out there that oh my goodness, it's so amazing how we can really be successful. All these individuals with a disability can truly be successful thanks to a lot of the technology.
I used to use the Mayor Johnson symbols, you guys, that were like cut out, and now I see things and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like revolutionary here. So
I think, sorry, real quick.
Please.
I mean, in the world of assistive technology, there's low tech and there's high tech. And I think like we need to understand that there's such power in low tech, assistive technology, from letterboards, picture symbols, like that just gives access, access, us having access to a person who is non-speaking and them having access to tell us what's on their mind. So I think sometimes in the world of employers or school or different in any realm, you think, oh, I have to do accommodations and it's going to cost me a fortune. We need to realize that there's so much low tech that can just open the world. And again, first it's changing our thoughts, but then realizing and understanding that there's the simplest things we could do to make an employment facility like accessible for a disabled employee, and to make a childcare center accessible to a kiddo, to make parks accessible. And I think that's something that has been given an input in the discussion in our city around inclusive playgrounds, is having picture boards so that a kiddo can communicate with their peers. And again, it's letting us as community members who might not have had prior experience see a different form of communication and have our mind open to an experience that's different from our own. And as kiddos, when kiddos have an opportunity to an experience that's different from their own, we know that increases their empathy and their ability to understand others. And so it starts from there. So something as simple as having like a picture board or a letter board can go a long way in promoting, access for folks.
Or I'm sorry, or visuals, just as simple as this, right? I'm sorry, you can't see. I printed out the outline of what we were doing today. Having a visual of what you're going to do for the day, no matter what the kids' disabilities. Kids need to know what's going on. They need to know how to prepare themselves for what they're going to do. We're going to so-and-so's house, right? Or we're going to go play at this place. They can, in their mind, think, okay, well, this place might not have this. I'm used to that. How can I accommodate myself? Working with your kids on how can they accommodate, what will you need? Is it bright? Do you need sunglasses? Do you have trouble walking much? Are you going to need a wheelchair? Are you going to need a walker? Are you going to need, just preparing your kids in that way so they can learn to self-advocate and learn what they need for themselves and not be afraid to ask people and say, you know what, I need to, or we go with a friend, can I park a little closer because I can't walk too far, my legs will hurt. Or I need to sit down while we're all waiting because I'll have trouble walking later.
Absolutely. And now we all have our phones, which is also, everybody now has access to be able to make accommodations for people with special needs. And we only have 5 minutes. And I want to wrap up with this important question that kind of circles back to the purpose of this. The name of this courageous conversation was Diversibilities, Building Bridges to Inclusion. And so I want to ask each of you, and I want to start with you, Mr. Salas, what does inclusion for people with special needs mean to you? And what is like the perfect world of like, this is what inclusion can look like?
Unfortunately, in my realm in education, that has come under attack during this last legislation with the disbandment of the DEI offices, and almost felt like a personal attack on social work. I mean, you can't have social work and teach social work without talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we're making do with what we got, and we're going to continue that fight. In regards to your question and talking about inclusion, it's really about allowing anybody the opportunity to participate, right? It's the complete opposite of exclusion. It's allowing people to try, right? I'm a big Star Wars person, right? So that the whole adage of do or do not, there is no try, just do, kind of like Nike, just do it, and allow individuals to give it a shot. I have individuals who, from internships to, doing different things, and even throughout the college, and that they didn't think that they would be able to do. And these are students that don't have disabilities. So why can't we afford people with disabilities just afford them that liberty or that freedom, right? To have the opportunity to try new things, to try, even in public education, we have inclusion classes where students can participate in music classes. They can participate in the band class, right? And I think at the end of the day, it comes with preparing teachers and preparing educators for those situations, right? I recall having a former or a friend of mine who was a band director saying, this is a great idea, but this is something that we was never taught in class. We weren't prepared for this. It's not that we don't want to have students in our class. It's just that we don't know what to do, right? Mm-hmm. So again, goes back to that empowering and the sharing of knowledge, and thus creating an open world for everybody, regardless of what label has been placed on them.
Absolutely. And what about you, Kristi?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. What does inclusion look like for you, for people with special needs?
Inclusion is making things accessible. Well, accessibility is, inclusion is you're telling someone to come, right? Mm-hmm. If it's not accessible, you're not being inclusive. You can't tell someone you can come, but there's no restroom for you, mm-hmm. right? Or come join us, but there's no food you can eat. Yeah. Or centering just being thinking of everything, thinking of people, the people with, there's all so many different disabilities. Just try to think of how can you accommodate the broader amount of people, right? And that includes culturally, because mm-hmm. we didn't touch on the intersectionality of culture and disability. There's so many, being on the border. I joke with my mom the other day. I said, oh my God, our culture is so loud. You know, I mean, being
Mhm.
Latina, it's like I remember growing up, you know, you're at a quinceañera, you're like under the table, the party's still going, you're trying to get comfy, and you're just like, oh, like there's so much intersectionality on that. And you know, you see someone, hi, go give your tío a kiss. And you're like, you don't necessarily want to do that. You know, don't feel bad. Your kids aren't being rude. Maybe the person has a lot of perfume on. You know, maybe they're scratchy. Maybe there's something, you know, autonomy is important, and autonomy is part of inclusion.
Absolutely. And, you know, we are out of time, unfortunately, but, you know, I hope that everybody that participated in this conversation walks away having learned something, and may we make our world a world where everybody belongs, everybody. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to the YWCA for allowing us to have this courageous conversation. I think we could have spent another 2 or 3 hours talking about all these different things, but hopefully we can continue the conversations in our everyday lives and spread this knowledge so that people with special needs can belong. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
You.